newtowntownship.org. Sorry about that. I will turn it back over to you. And I'm going to buzz. I'm going to be on my other meeting for just a couple minutes and I'll come back in.
Ed, could you please wait 1/2 a second? For whatever reason, YouTube is having a moment.
Oh, listen to those birds. Oh.
All right, we are live on YouTube. So Ed, if you would like to take it away.
All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. It is 8:08 a.m. on Wednesday, May 19th, 2021. It is springtime. I'll do the roll call. I wish I had everybody's name in front of me. That would be nice. I will call the members first. John Weaver.
Here.
Sherry, I apologize. I'm not good with last names.
Smith.
Sherry Smith, right. Alex, you got to kill your last name.
Skookus, easy way to remember. It rhymes with mucus, and I'm here.
Oh, geez.
Larry Fisher.
Here.
Lisa, last name.
Purcell, and I'm here.
Great. Okay. And then on the supervisors, Leonard.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here. And it's Altieri.
Oh, great. And is Tina on?
I do not see Tina at the moment.
Okay, great. And then we have Rich and Steve and myself, Ed Naples. I believe we have a quorum. We'll do a moment of silence. Next, we'll move down for approving of the agenda for this meeting that's been circulated and posted on the township website. All in favor of the approval of this agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so noted. Steve, I believe, just made the public comment for agenda items, commentary in terms of how any members of the public wish to participate in the meeting or raise a question.
And Ed, if you give me 1 second, let me check all the different spots and make sure we do not have any. I see nobody with their hand raised, and I'm checking the email right now. And I see no public comment.
Great, no public comments are noted. Next item on the agenda is considering the minutes from the April 26th meeting. So I'm wondering how we're going to do that. In terms of, is there a written text of that meeting, or how is?
There is a written text. This is Alex Skookus, I guess, since I'm the secretary. I did look at those. The only comment I had on them was that under the category supervisor present, it was a little bit goofed up who was present and who wasn't. So we'll fix that to reflect that Lisa was at the last meeting and I was as well. But that was the only changes that I had to the excellent minutes that were typed up by Nick Schlegel in the township.
Is that a matter of public record also on the township website? And I should know the answer to this question.
So it's actually attached to this agenda. So the answer to that is yes.
It's attached to this agenda. Okay.
Correct.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't scroll down, of course. There we go. Okay. And there's all the members of the committee. Okay. That's good. Ed, you should have looked at this, but Ed was out last night. Partying. So Ed's a little slow today. Okay. Reports.
Well, wait, do we need to approve the minutes formally, Steve?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Oh, okay.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the minutes as presented with the changing of the members that were present?
Motion
So
to
moved.
approve.
I say,
Any discussion? None. All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Minutes approved. My job is done.
Okay,
Till next month.
great. All right, now we're going to move over, I believe, to the monthly report. So we're down into Rich's fabulous work product.
Sure. So I apologize for not looking into the camera. I actually had my notes on the laptop, but since I'm sharing my screen, I'm gonna have to look at my notes on a different screen. So to date, our revenues are ahead in comparison to March, about $165,000. Our expenses are up about $563,000. With that being said, $563,000 seems like a very large increase, but 460 of this, or 82%, is due to transfers and capitals. If everybody recalls, last year, the Board of Supervisors put a temporary freeze on all transfers to capital just because of what was going on with the pandemic. Some transfers took place later in the year, but as of April 2020, there were $562,000 in capital expenses that got transferred in comparison to last year. So let's start with revenues. Like I said, our revenues are up about $165,000. Our real estate taxes are up approximately $50,000, taking into account the new growth that we looked at from the 2020 billing cycle to the 2021 billing cycle. This is right on track with collections that we've seen in previous years. The major line item that you're really going to see with a very large increase is our other taxes. LST tax saw an increase of about $16,000, and real estate transfer taxes saw an increase about $471,000. Like I spoke about last month, the mainline health building accounts for approximately $395,000 of the $471,000 increase. So that's a one-time big chunk transfer that we got that I guess we can hope for that happens every year, but that's something that we can't bank on because obviously it hasn't happened yet this year. The other small increase in LST, the $16,000, and the additional increases above the mainline health, I believe we can say that this is attributed to the pandemic. If everybody recalls last year, as much as we don't want to, April was the heart of when things actually really started to go south. So this just might be our revenues returning, our LST and our real estate transfer taxes returning to where they were in previous years, taking the pandemic out of the situation. So our licenses and fines and rents are showing a slight decrease of about $4,500. This is primarily due to rentals not being rented in 2021. The first few months of 2020, we had the ability to rent things out before everything got shut down. Clearly, things are still shut down, so we lost the first couple months of revenue of 2020, but the small decrease of about $4,500. In addition, interest is also down $22,000. This is just associated with a much lower interest rate that we're getting now due to everything that happened in the pandemic. I hate to keep blaming everything on the pandemic, but I guess it's a fact. The township saw an increase of about $22,000 in state grants. The recycling grant came in earlier in 2021 than in 2020, causing an increase of about $42,000. But on the contrary, PennDOT's snow removal contract hasn't come in yet, and it came in 2020. So the net increase of those, the one grant coming in early and the other grant coming in late, is about $22,000. The other place you'll see an increase is other funding sources. This increase is associated with court settlements and some donations made in 2021 that weren't in 2020. And the last major decrease you're going to see in revenues is in public safety of about $380,000. This is pretty much line for line permit revenue. Permits are down in 2021 in comparison to 2020. So with all that being said, our revenues are up about $165,000. So moving on to a quick overview of expenses. Like I said before, spending is up about $560,000, but 82% of this is transferred capital. This money is shown as an expense in the general fund, but even though it's being shown as an expense in the general fund, this does not mean that $560,000 has been expensed out of the capital fund. It's just the way, I'm sure the majority of you know, that's just the way the fund accounting works. The money is sitting in the capital fund waiting to be expensed, but it's shown in the general fund because it came out of the general fund. That makes sense. So we'll take salaries, benefits, and personnel all as one. They're up approximately about $200,000. The increase is a variety of things, including police salary adjustments, non-uniform salary adjustments, overtime-related costs associated with some snow, and an increase in MMOs. In addition, there's some expenses that have been expensed in 2021 that haven't been expensed in 2020, and it's just timing issues. A lot of our contractual costs, such as our health benefits, have been paid out in 2021, but not yet been paid out, were not yet paid out in 2020. So as you can see, there's a decrease of about about $100,000 in operating expenses. In 2020, the primary cause of this is in 2020, the fire company asked for their entire year contribution in April. This is not the case in 2021, as we're paying them out quarterly as we've done in the past. So the $100,000 there is primarily because we paid the fire company out more upfront last year than we did this year. And the last increase you'll see in expenses is debt, and this is just because we took out 2 additional borrowings last year, and the interest is paid monthly. So like I said, overall, our revenues are up $166,000, and our expenses are up $564,000, with $460 of it being a transfer cap. So that is where the township is at in comparison to April of 2020 in a nutshell. So I will open it up to questions if anybody had any.
Yeah, Rich, it sounds, without putting words in your mouth, it sounds like things are tracking the way it was projected without any issues of concern on the horizon.
Yeah, yes. I was actually trying to look back at 2019. Yeah, sorry, I'm working on multiple different years here, so it's hard to keep track of my years at this point.
So you instead of using 2020, you're using 2019 as a base.
Yeah, so looking back at 2019, our LST and our real estate transfer tax, taking, obviously the mainline health out, are much more in line than where they were with 2020. So yes, it looks like things are starting to get back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, I hope everything doesn't shut down again next week, and I fighted myself.
Are there any other questions for Rich?
Yeah, Rich, on the permit revenues, you said we're way down. I know you and I have had that discussion. We budgeted $1 million plus in revenue on the permit side, yet we only have on the expense side, the codes enforcement is half of that, 500,000. So is this because we're tracking back to normal, or so in the next budget we're going to see us not over budget that? I'm not asking I haven't had enough coffee, but basically we budgeted $1 million, even though the expenses are only 500,000. That's because we knew there was going to be more permits coming in from all the building going on. But are we seeing that slow down now, such that in the next budget we'll have the we won't be budgeting so much on revenue for the permit side?
Yeah, so I'm sure some of the longer term members of this committee, since Steve and I have gotten here, we've got here roughly at the same time. We've always been trying to back permit revenue down because we've had this large one time. We say it's one time, but we're going on the sixth year setting. That once the building stops, we need to be somewhere between about $500,000 to $600,000 in permit revenue, and this is something that we spend a lot of time figuring out. But to answer your question is, we've had some discussions with some builders and contractors in this past budget cycle, and yeah, it really does seem like building is starting to wrap up. I know Lister is going to be out relatively shortly. I know BPG is just starting another phase, but most of the permit revenues already came in for that. So to answer your question is, yeah, it's something that we're going to really have to look at in the next budget cycle, without these one-time large projects coming in. And I believe Leonard's hand is raised, and I believe I gave him the ability to talk.
Well, I think it was because he was over as an attendee.
Oh,
Yep, that's exactly it. That's all.
okay.
So we also have somebody on the phone here. I'm going to allow them to speak just in case if it's one of our board members, if that's all right with you, Ed.
Yes, it is. We'll just need to have their name and address.
Yeah. So I can't tell who's on the phone.
Yeah, it's Tina Roberts.
Oh,
Lightcap.
Okay.
Tina, I'm going to promote you.
Okay.
No.
Oh boy.
Easy.
Congratulations.
Easy now.
Actually, I can't. So I'm just going to rename you so that I have you there.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, on these, in the morning, it's easier for me just to call in because I'm on my way to the office. So that's my phone number.
All right.
I do have a question, if I may. And this may be something we've covered in the past, and I just don't remember, but how do our fees for permits and all those other things compare to other communities? And have we done any kind of analysis as to if they were a little bit lower, would more people be incented to do things, or we do not want people to do things?
Very good question. When I first came, we did a little bit of an examination, and I think we were probably somewhere, when I was looking, it wasn't the highest, but we definitely were not the lowest when it came to permit fees. We have never based permit fees on encouraging or not encouraging work. We did it more based on really as to we haven't really changed permit fees since I've been here. Okay. We took kind of what was set by the board, prior boards, and let that just kind of ride. What we have watched is that as Rich said, we did not anticipate 6 years of what we've experienced. So, we kept saying that this was going to stop, and then it turns around and goes again. And so, maybe we do need to reevaluate that. But if we start looking at where we are other than phase 2 of the BPG has started, there's not a whole lot of new building areas going on that's, large projects. It's mostly individuals doing their homes. And so that will probably have a greater impact of where we are with all of that.
Yeah, if I could, Steve and Sherry, my thought process is with what Rich was just saying, if we look out a year from now and we don't have these large projects, it does raise the question right to the Board of Supervisors in terms of would it make sense? Would it be appropriate to raise those fees just from an inflation perspective, from the fact that they haven't been raised for umpteenth years, but also as a driver towards do you want to have the permits become a more significant portion of the total revenue as compared to raising the real estate tax on everybody?
You really don't. The real goal is to have permit fees cover the cost that it takes to do permits. That's the goal, and that's where you are. That's where you're supposed to try to end up being. The challenge that we have right now is that we're just having some very large commercial projects being done, or very large residential projects done that are not normal. And we did a history. Rich came in and I asked him to look back, what was it, 10 or 15 years? I don't remember exactly. Rich went back and looked at where were we before all this started. And then we said, that's where we should base everything. And that's what we try to base everything on to cover the cost of the codes department.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because that's really what permit fees are supposed to do. They're supposed to cover the cost of the codes department.
So is that part of the analytics that's done on a year-to basis as to whether or not is the permit fee revenue as generated covering the cost, or is it just?
Well, we do look at that, and obviously right now it's probably more than covering the cost, just because we have some, very large permits that come in that are not normal.
Right, concentrated, large concentrated.
AmeriHealth every year, right? Or even the 250 unit apartment building. And part of the challenge we've had is we've even talked with developers and said, okay, what do you think you're going to do? And they come in and they tell me one thing and then they do something different. And so, which I understand, that's part of the project, they got to pull when they're ready and, when it makes sense for them. And several times we thought things were coming in the following year that came in the year before. And we've had vice versa. We've had things where we thought were coming in this year and didn't come into next. And so particularly on the big projects, it's all a matter of funding, when they're going to get funding. We are pretty consistent. What we tried to do is evaluate where the average was. And when we back out the big projects, we are almost on target. Every year we stay between that 450 and 600,000 range. And that's about what it cost us under normal circumstances to run the codes department. When we have these big projects come in, that cost goes up. It probably does not go up as much as some of the big projects are, but it does vary based on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also just like to add, I believe it was last year I was contacted by another, to go back to, I guess, Sherry's original question, are permits highs or lows? I was contacted by another municipality in Delaware County, and they were trying to find out if their permits were high and low as well. And one of the challenges that they came back and said that they had was everybody has their own way of calculating the permit revenues from township to township. So to compare apples to apples was very hard. I'll actually try to dig their overall findings up and share it with everybody next time, but I'm not even sure how far they got, just because it was so-and-so charges this and they're a little bit higher on this, but you don't charge this, but you charge this. And it seems
so some of the examples, just to give an example that's a little bit more concrete for you to take, for you to understand. Some people do it based on square footage.
Yep.
Some people do it based on the cost.
Yeah.
Some people do it based on the number of, like for plumbing, they do it on the number of fixtures. Some people on the electric do it based on the number of outlets. It's crazy when you start looking at some of the different ways. We do it based on cost of the project. And there is an argument that may not be necessary. If somebody does a high-end plumbing project, is it really that much more of our time to look at a high-end plumbing project versus somebody that just puts in, standard equipment? And so there is some of that, but I've had the conversation with Andy. Certain times high-end does require different kinds of plumbing. Obviously a toilet is a toilet, but when you start getting into some of these showers, you end up having showers that have different kinds of bases and things like that. And you got to make sure that all the right membranes are down and all those kind of things. So sometimes it does require more. And so there's no easy way to do this and say the right way is this. Nobody's come back and said this is the best standard for how to do it.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Sherry, I tried that exercise last week. I pulled Radnor's fees and I pulled ours just to make the comparison, and it's not. I gave up, quite frankly, because like our pool fees, I don't remember. To put in a pool, it was either $200 or $300, but it was the other in Radnor. But then on other stuff, our fees were cheaper or more expensive, and there was absolutely no way for me to you couldn't reach a conclusion that we're higher or lower, and and we format our fees differently.
Yeah.
And if I had nothing else to do, it might be a fun exercise, but it wasn't.
Well, when you get the time to want to do that, let me know, because we can have a conversation. But I tell you, it's a very labor intensive.
We can start assigning homework.
I did at one point. I've been in this, and I was in finance in Phoenixville. In Phoenixville one time, I did try to take like 5 other municipalities and just run our projects through their fee schedule to try to determine it, and it was hard. It's just really hard, and just because their fee schedule says something, it doesn't mean that's how they actually implement it. May be even different. So. It's a little bit more difficult.
Are there any other questions related to the topic here and more importantly, the monthly reports? All right, no other questions. Then we'll put it out. I need a motion to accept the monthly reports.
So moved.
Second,
All
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, accepted. Next item on the agenda is 2022 budget workshop outcomes. I think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so if I can, Monday night, the board met with all of staff, and we went through the different outcomes that were expected out of the strategic plan. And we started talking about what things we think ought to be potentially considered in the budget, for the staff to start going out and really start pulling some numbers to do that. And so the good news is we had a lot of input. The bad news is I haven't been able to get it all retyped out and set up for you so that you could see it here this morning. But we will do that. But almost on every outcome, we had 3 or 4 items that came out of that would be things that the board and or staff were interested in seeing in the 2022 budget. Which means that when we get to the end, we're going to have lots of choices and lots of decisions to make through the budget process, just because some of them, we just know are expensive. When you start looking at doing a neighborhood's stormwater issue, that's a big issue. And the board's still going to have to work through some of the ideas of, ways that we may choose to fund that, and so they're no easy. This is not an easy decision kind of thing. So we're going to work through all of that with the board over the next several months, and hopefully as we start getting near the fall, we'll have a little bit clearer direction where we're headed. But right now, we just so you understand the process we went through, we basically took the strategic plan, we took the outcomes that we wanted to achieve, and we went through each one and said, what is it that we want to do in 2022 to try to accomplish that? And so we're, like I said, the staff is now going to go back and get pricing for each one of those, and we're going to base it off of, like, for example, one of the things we talked about was potentially putting in permanent speed tables. in some neighborhoods, helping to address speeding in neighborhoods, because that was one of the outcomes that came out of the strategic plan, was to greatly reduce speeding in neighborhoods. Well, if each speed table is somewhere between $10,000 to $15,000, we can't do 100 speed tables in town in 1 year, right? You know, I mean, that's just probably not going to happen. And so we need to start looking at where the priorities are, how many we think we want to really do in 1 year, and how we're going to kind of tackle that over time. And so those are the things that we're going to look at. One of the other things is, you know, do we bring in some more temporary speed tables to help us determine where the permanent ones should go? And does that give us a little bit of a shorter term answer, because they're a little bit cheaper? But the long term, we know that what really will work long term is if we do the speed tables the long way.
In that regard, Steve, is there any funding available at the state level that could help support that, or is this all on our own?
Probably not for speed tables. You know, the PennDOT doesn't encourage speed tables. They actually discourage speed tables. You know, they allow them, but they would prefer to see that you not have them at all. And so
Why?
Mostly because the speed tables are they're very difficult for maintaining roads. The plowing tends to want to tear them up, and when you put them in,
stopping,
it's a little bit of a challenge. And so you want to balance what's the right number to help accomplish what you're trying to accomplish and not overdo it. And so you want to come up with that balance. And they tend to affect stormwater a little bit if they're not put in exactly right. There's lots of issues that come with them that you've got to be really careful what you do. But the biggest issue is snow issues with what happens there. And so we'll work through that. They can be done well, but the ones, the way PennDOT typically likes them, it doesn't necessarily get the best bang for the buck when it comes to slowing down traffic, right? You know, because they like a more gradual speed table. And if it's a more gradual speed table, people have learned that you can go over those at a higher speed, right? So
use it as a ramp.
You kind of have to, it's kind of like a ramp, right? You have to kind of balance out what you're trying to accomplish in that.
I think John Weaver and I know the #1 location for speed tables.
Indeed. So true.
So my guess is your #1 is not necessarily the same #1 for everybody else.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Probably true.
Steve, how many members of the public were listening? And I was one of them.
Yeah, I was going to say you were one of them, Alex. I saw you there. I was actually going to ask how you thought the meeting went. I think there was about 10 to 12 throughout the meeting. It kind of kept going up and down. I was trying to watch it.
I thought 15 at the high.
The 15 at the high?
Yeah.
Okay.
Look, I thought it was phenomenal. My 2 young girls kept checking in, and they found it ineffably boring. But I thought I've been begging the school district to do this for years, like to set goals, to discuss them openly, and to when you said at the end, Steve, of your comments, you said what would be the performance measures to determine whether we meet our goals? Because sometimes you set goals and they can be a little bit nebulous, but if you set up performance measures, then both the public and the people doing the work can tell whether they're meeting the goals. And the whole thing I thought was just great. And I'm a little bit disappointed that we didn't have more folks listening in, but I get it. I mean, I guess it can be boring in that sense, but it's exciting to see a group of people get together and discuss like how our town can grow. And, there was some maybe minor disputes of things, but nobody, I thought it was just a great, polite discussion. And even what was it called? Pipe dream stuff. It was good for people to throw that out there. They said, hey, here's some pipe dreams about how we want our town to go with a little trolley system and, the walking paths or whatever. But to get that discussion out there in the context of a budget, I thought was great. Really good job.
I attended for the 2 hours, and I totally concur with Alex. It was, as someone who's been coming to these budget meetings and watching the township for over 15 years, I can recall going to a meeting in mid 2000s saying to the supervisors, what are your goals? And I couldn't get an answer. So I thought it was absolutely incredible. I'm not surprised there weren't more than 15 people, but I'm telling you, if you go back 10 years, that's 10 times as many people as you had at any budget session. I thought it was excellent start.
I appreciate both your feedbacks. Go ahead, Ed.
Will that be communicated in the In magazine in terms of what the plan is for 2022?
As we get closer, I actually, I'm going to say maybe not, because we intend to do a actual mailing that's a township kind of newsletter. One of the comments that we got from the strategic plan is that people don't think we have a township newsletter, so they don't consider In magazine to be our newsletter. So we are actually looking at creating a newsletter that is that's ours. It's more expensive. There's no question about it. But if people feel like it's theirs, that's way more important than what the dollar value is at the end. And In community keeps going up in cost. They're at $300 a page right now for us to put in. When we started, it cost us nothing. And so, in 6 years, they've gone up to 300, and I anticipate they're going up higher.
Sure. Yeah, you'll put it out there for free and then hook them, right?
Yeah, and my fear is that if I'm going to spend, close to $3,000 on a issue of In community, and people are saying they don't see that as our newsletter, I'd rather spend $6,000 and put something out that people say is ours.
Yeah.
And that's what the board talked about last year. We wanted to get 2 out this year. So we're going to start working on getting 1 out here for the summer, and then probably another one in the fall.
Mm-hmm. Great idea.
Hey, Steve, as you go forward to that, you've probably already thought about this. A lot of organizations, when they send out a newsletter, they put in it, would you rather receive this by email?
Yeah.
So that can, if somebody says, yes, I prefer email, that's one less copy you have to mail.
Yeah. I just have to make sure we have a way of collecting all those emails.
Yeah.
Making sure that we do a good job of, keeping those up to date. That's the big thing. Yeah, we will definitely look for that opportunity. If I can do them electronically, that would be awesome, because it would save a ton of money. So that's the process that we started. Like I said, right now, it's a lot back on the staff to go back and get things together, get pricing together. And we'll be starting to look at presenting things to the board in that late summer, early fall timeframe, like we have in the past. But we'll be doing it with more of the detail in mind of where we are, and more of a focus on what our goals are.
Next item, Steve, I think
budget?
I'm sorry, go ahead. All right, I don't think there's any action that we need to take in terms of affirming on that. Maybe Steve, you could talk, or Rich, on the capital improvement plan.
So Rich, I'm going to have you go ahead and pull up the asset list so they can see it. If you just click on it, it'll come up. Yep.
Well, it's okay. It's 32 pages, so we're going to look at we'll look at page number 1 and I can slowly scroll through it if everybody likes.
Will we be given a break for lunch?
We're not going to go through all 32
We're going to need a potty break.
So I can start it off and kind of open a discussion. I wanted to have a discussion with this group. As Steve and I have talked about, I know at last month minimum, we've been sitting in on, we've been looking into the idea of having a formal capital improvement program. To date, we have, the road program where we build it into the budget every year. We have an IT replacement program. we started a public works replacement program. But when you look at some of these larger municipalities that are really setting the trends, they have fully adopted, approved by the board capital improvement plans. As Steve and I started to get into how to start forming one of these, it's a pretty robust process. So with us having, you know, minimal staff here, we really need to focus on the first step, which would be discussing the scope of how we want to formulate this. Because like I said, there's 32 pages of assets, and I'm not sure how many are on each page, but if we go through each asset, we'll be here for, some of these assets will age out before we ever get the capital improvement plan started. So I went on and I did a little bit more research, and some of the ways that some of these municipalities, smaller municipalities that have these capital improvement programs started was they either took an asset class, such as buildings, infrastructure, vehicles, or they took a cost. For our budgeting purposes, we use anything higher than $5,000 with a useful life of more than 1 year. That's what we consider a capital item. But just because it's a capital budgeted item, it may not have to be included in our first go around of the capital improvement plan, because everything on this list is more than $5,000 and more than 1 useful year. So like I said, I just wanted to keep everybody informed and see if anybody had any thoughts or has seen any other capital improvement plans from other municipalities. I know, Lisa, that I believe you work in municipal government, and I'm actually not sure if these are, I know they're part of the budget document for a lot of places, but I don't think that they're actually audited. So we were just bouncing around some ideas on the scope, because once we define the scope, we need to go into each asset and define what we believe is, you know, the useful life of it, how long we have to actually replace the ones that we have, things along those lines. So it's a very robust process, but we were just opening it for discussion and or feedback.
Yeah, I would say that it is great to have a capital budget in addition to your operating budget, and it is a very labor intensive job. I don't think there's a way to get out of the details, but I would suggest maybe looking at the financial statements and sort of starting there and then drilling down. And I would probably focus on priority based on either the age of the assets or the significance of them, and just try to start somewhere. And I think it would probably take a couple months to pull it together. What some municipalities do is have an outside, company do a project to put this all together. Sometimes you have to get an engineering study or things like that for the infrastructure side of things. I guess another way to look at it is you can divvy it up by department and charge the department heads with their portion to say, what do we have? What do we need?
George is having heart failure right now, and he doesn't even know we're talking this way.
I think most of the time people will hire, a firm to help out, because you do need a team, I would say, to deal with this many assets. And like you have to look at the ages, and once you get everything current, I think it becomes easier to manage. But that first initial setup will probably take a month at least, or more. Yeah.
One of the thoughts that that we've been thinking, or I've been thinking, and Lisa, I appreciate your input there, and I do think it's a good place to start. In my thought is, do we take a couple assets and say, look, these are really, I understand that that we depreciate the building over 40 years, but my guess is we're going to be in this building a lot longer than 40 years, and at least I hope so. And so, you know, my question, I mean, we'll have to do another renovation like we did, you know, back in 2016 or whatever it was. But can we take, you know, my thoughts are, and I was hoping to get some kind of guidance from this committee of saying, maybe we take and say, with our buildings, we think we're pretty healthy right now. And do we just set those aside and not spend a lot of time? You know, we've just invested, you know, a brand new public works building that's, you know, 3 years old. We have, you know, the building we're in is a little bit older, but really what we're going to be facing is maintenance issues, not really major restructuring or remodeling issues, probably for the next 20 years. And so, not that we don't need to be thinking about it, because you know, if you don't think about it, then the day you need it, everybody's going, where are we going to get this from? But, you know, when I look at it, I think about some of the things that we have, and I start thinking about, when I think about asset classes that I'm really concerned about, is it comes into our stormwater, which we can't see. That's, you know, it's the one that that gets kind of, you know, the only time you ever think about it is when you got the flooding after the rain, right? So, or you start thinking about some of those things like we have with road replacement. We've, you know, said those are things that we understood that if we came up with a plan and we worked that plan, it will probably be something we can get to, that we can manage pretty well. And we're almost there. I think one more year, maybe 2 more years of us putting $50,000 more into that pot, we're going to be really close to having a road program that will get us to where we want to be very long term. And, you know, and inflation is going to drive that up, and we'll probably have to add more money over time. But, you know, we have 300,000. Was it last year that we hit 300,000, Rich, or was it this year we hit 300,000?
I believe we're at 350 this year.
350 this year. So, you know, you know, so we're getting really close there. We obviously have talked about the police department vehicles, and we're talking about public works vehicles. But I start looking down and I start saying, what's that next asset class that we should really be tackling? And so what I would think is, Rich, if this is available to everybody through the agenda online.
Yes.
But if you could look through this, and maybe at our next meeting, we would start talking about, as you look at the asset classes and how long they last, and, you know, looking particularly, if you start looking at some of our infrastructure that's buried, we've depreciated it out. You know, I mean, it's probably getting very close to not even having any book value whatsoever.
Yeah, for example, right.
That's a building, isn't it?
Yes.
So you know, as we start looking at that, what is it that we should focus on over, you know, what would this group kind of recommend our focus be on over the next couple of years, based on some input that we continue to give you, so that we start building this capital improvement plan. What's interesting is we started something back in 2016 or something like that, a capital improvement plan. We came up with a thing, and we were working it, and it felt like it was a little awkward, and we said maybe we need to reevaluate this, and that's what Rich and I tried to go do this time, and found out that basically what we were doing was really the best practice, as it was. And so
we should have just stuck it out.
We should have just stuck it out. It just seemed very awkward and very time consuming, and it is. And that's the problem. Good capital improvement plans just take a lot of time. And so, but if we can figure out the asset classes that we should really make the plans about, and then set everything else up, you know, and saying we have in the back of our minds, we have a plan of how we're going to do it. Like I'm saying, IT, for example, I don't know that we need a full capital improvement plan for IT, but you know, we should budget accordingly for it, but we should really put our focus on some of the bigger kinds of things that are really going to be the things that are going to have major impact on taxpayers as we go down. And like stormwater is one of those. I'm thinking of some of the other things like that.
Yeah, I'm into this now. I'm looking at the schedule. I'm at page 25 of 56. Just, I think that's where it starts. And so when I'm looking at this, I don't understand the distinction. I'm under the building classification. And I see 1083, 1084. So these are all coded. How would we know which is which? How would we be able, because I'm obviously thinking about prioritization, but in order to prioritize, I need to know what it is I'm looking at.
Yeah, so Ed, if you, I'm trying to figure out how to, are you looking, can you see where I have highlighted?
Like
He's
I said,
highlighted land improvement.
I just drilled into the asset report, started at the very top under the building classification, just to try and understand what it is that's in front of me.
Yeah, so if you look at it, at the top of the report, there's the header, and then it says description, and then a little bit down and to the left, it says department, then classification.
Yes.
So where the one I'm looking at right now says land improvement. So the bottom line on there, that is the classification of asset. You should have building lands, land improvements, infrastructures, vehicles, equipment, things along those lines.
Got it.
So those are the asset, that's how we define our asset classes.
Okay.
I'm not sure that answers your question. Does that answer your question, Ed?
It kind of, but I'm thinking the township has multiple buildings.
Yeah.
Got
so-
it. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
So, which building is which?
Yeah.
So, and then obviously it's all different dollar amounts. Like, for example, I'm looking at 1,088, where its total cost is 245,000, as compared to building number 1,085 with a total cost of $17,716. So obviously there's a scale here. I'm trying to get to how to prioritize, but in order to prioritize, I need to be able to understand what it is that I'm looking at. Which building am I looking at?
Yeah, and I think, Ed, what we're going to find is a little bit of that. The system, sorry to say, probably is not tracking all the information that would be beneficial in knowing some of these things. And so we're going to have to make some assumptions. And like, for example, we can pretty much go back and look at like where Rich has got highlighted, the page he's on. I know that the building renovations there that are the multi-million-dollar ones, that was something that we did here recently. Right. And we should go back in and change the description so it says it's the township building and make it more clear. The ones that are going to be hard is when you start going back in the 90s and the 70s.
Yeah.
We're probably not going to know that answer.
Yeah, you're inheriting things and you don't know the legacy, right? I understand.
But what we do know is we do know that there's a value of our building today. And if we put those together and kind of, brought all of those different pieces and say, these are the building. I mean, we've basically got 3 or 4 buildings in the township that we maintain. You got the paper mill house. And, the Historic Society does a lot of that, but we have made, like we're going to put a new roof on it this year and things like that. Mm-hmm. You have the township building and you have the Public Works building as a separate building now. But, and there's a couple bathrooms, but, we don't have extensive amounts of buildings that are on our books. And so actually we may find some of the 70s stuff isn't even really something we should be worried about today, just because.
Well, is it really gone? I mean, that raises the question. It's just a carryover. It's fully depreciated, and we no longer maintain that for whatever reason. Well,
and that's a good question. Or was it a remodel like we did this last go around, and we remodeled again, and it really should come off?
Right. Yeah. So if you have a lot of assets, you got to go through and do the inventory. Do we still have this asset?
Yeah. I mean. We did, so the township did hire a consultant, I believe it was back in 2000 and, was it 13?
They did it in 2000, I'm sorry, they did it previous to 2007, but then to get in compliance with Gatsby 34, they actually had somebody back out because some of the asset classes that they needed didn't get appraised. So I believe it was 13 or 14 was the most recent one, and that's actually where the basis of this list started, and that's why some of the I guess the descriptions are very vague. We pretty much took them right off of the report that the appraiser gave us.
Mhm.
Did the appraiser have any additional information? I mean, did you take everything the appraiser had and put it in? Do you have more information that hasn't been put into the report and categorized?
Nothing relevant.
Okay.
I mean, they have like, for example, serial numbers and things along those lines that our system just doesn't have the ability to put in here. Or I'm sorry, this report doesn't show. I believe that they're actually in the system, but nothing that would help us identify what anything is unless we physically had serial numbers in front of us.
I think it's the old phrase that nobody cares about data until there's a crisis. But it would be great if we could figure out a way, even if it's a summer intern, to get just somebody that has the time to dig in, figure out what all this stuff is or isn't, and decide what data points we need, and just try to update the report. I know if we try to get Rich to do it,
That's
or
not a
Nick,
good use of his time. No,
yeah, it's not a good use of your time.
no.
Oh, thank you both.
No, I was thinking we could hire the birds that are in the background there, John, and let them do it.
I was gonna say, if they're annoying, I can mute again.
No, you just got to feed them occasionally.
Reminds me of Cinderella.
All right. I know we're
So-
past our 9 o'clock.
I just had one quick comment. Sorry, Ed. I didn't mean to interrupt, but the other thing is to work with the engineer, because sometimes they do have information in a different way that may help with identifying some of the fixed assets. Just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you.
And Sherry actually had a question. Sherry, this comes from our accounting software, so it's a fixed asset module within our accounting software.
So, but we can probably put it out into like what would be an Excel format if that's what you're asking.
Just wondering how you keep track of it all, but if you have a fixed asset system in the GL, then that makes sense.
Yep.
This would be a great summer intern job. That's I'm sure there's 1,000 others for a summer intern, but this is perfect. All right, then. We're past our time. I'll do quickly old business, new business on comment. If anybody has anything, the only thing I could inject into this, and I remember we talked about this a while back, with the Colonial Pipeline extravaganza, I was thinking again about cybersecurity at the township. So maybe at our next meeting, we could have that as an agenda item, and just make sure we understand what's going on and how well we're protected.
Much better than we were before.
All
So
right.
we can discuss that. Some of it we may not discuss while it's being recorded. Just I don't want to get
okay.
detailed, but
Don't want to get a big.
Yeah,
This
because
is a firewall.
I don't want to be killed.
but we can give you an overall where we are.
Absolutely.
That would be great.
We can do
That
that.
would be perfect. Any other comments from the committee?
Well, this is not really for the committee at all, but I just want to be sure that Steve and Rich know not to send any escrow bills to Sherry Smith at Dunwoody because she's no longer there. So I think it's probably best if you send them to Len Deschino, the controller,
Okay.
because I do not know the email address for my replacement. Her name is Maureen Casey, but I don't know her email. I guess it's mcasey@dunwoody.org. But I didn't want to have them get into a bad situation financially, or you, by having them go to a dead email address.
Okay, I'll make the change on the account.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Are there any other comments from the public?
I do not see any hands raised, and I do not see any in the public comment email.
All right, then I will call the meeting adjourned at 9:07. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye now.
Thank you.